Alright guys, welcome back to Schmattz Outdoors. Today we're gonna show you a step-by-step process on how I set up my coyote traps. So I'm gonna be working with some MB-550s. I bought a dozen brand new ones here. I'm gonna go, like I said, step-by-step on what I do to the traps, some small modifications to it, and how I get them set up to ready to go for the season. And I'm talking about pan tension, I'm shock springing them, putting my name tag on them, because in Minnesota where I trap, we got to have our name and our DNR number or some other information on there. I actually, just on that note, I put the required information that we're supposed to, plus my phone number on there, just in case somebody would happen to, find one of my traps, something like that, and they need to get a hold of me. Whether or not they're going to know to peel that name tag off, a DNR officer will know to peel that name tag off to figure out whose trap it is. So they should be able to get the trap back to me, and it actually has worked in my favor. So I had a couple of traps picked up by a Fish and Game personnel a few years ago. They thought my traps were illegally set for muskrats, so they left my pole but took my two traps, and like a year later they actually got a hold of me and he mailed me back the traps. So they were legally set, and the pictures that this contractor for the Fish and Game had taken of my set saying that it was illegal showed that it was set perfectly legal, but it got the traps back to me. The Fish and Game got a hold of me and got them sent back to me. So like I said, I put the required information on my name tags plus my phone number. Alright, so I'm kind of set up here on my table. Again, I don't have a real good workbench, so I use my table for making everything. So I'm going to go step by step through the things that I use to, build my traps. And then I'm going to go through, at the beginning here, I'm going to go through some of the tools I use. Once I kind of show you everything I got laid out here, I'm actually going to go through and I'll get a bunch of these traps kind of at different steps in the process. So then I don't have to show you doing a whole trap start to finish, because it's going to be, take me quite a while. I typically do one step at a time for all 12 traps, and then do the next step for all 12 traps and so on. But for you guys, like I said, I'm going to get one trap at kind of each stage of the process. So once I turn you on again, I'll basically be showing you what I did in that step. I maybe show you a little bit of what I did, but I'm not going to go too crazy on doing everything to every trap on camera for you guys. I'm going to do enough that you guys should be able to tell what I'm doing with my traps. So what I got here, again, I just got my kitchen table. I have a piece of cardboard down just to protect my table. I actually have this guy clamped down to my table. Some of you may be wondering why this is here, but I'll get to that in just a second. So kind of the tools that I'm using when they're brand new traps. So like I said, I'm building some MB-550s. I'm a closed jaw guy. We'll go into that just in a little bit here, a little more, but I'm going to start with some 550s. Over here I got a whole dozen of them, brand new ones. When they're brand new, up until the point that I basically degrease them, you do not need to touch them, or you can touch them with bare hands. You do not need gloves. Everything's greasy, so I actually wear gloves just to keep my hands clean more than anything. So I use these Semperforce gloves. I use them for skinning. I use them for setting coyote sets and everything. They're a scent-free glove. Like I said, I use them for everything on my line. I use them for skinning and all that as well. So like I said, I use a ton of these guys. I just have a box here I actually leave at my house. So for things like this, I can work on things. You can change your oil and everything with them, just keep your hands clean. Going through the tools here, so this is kind of the gamut of the tools that I may or may not need. I will use most of these, but I may not use all of them. So I just got a water pump pliers, we call it. You can use different styles. I got 2 different lineman pliers, one a little heavier duty, and as you guys know, this is my favorite tool on my whole line. I'll be using both of those. We got a flat screwdriver. This is a J-hook crimper or an S-hook crimper, whatever you want to call it. This is a tool for actually bending this part of your trap back and forth. I'm not real sure what the actual tool is called. I shouldn't need to use these on these 550s. I don't think I ever have, but I have it here anyway. I got a Phillips screwdriver. I shouldn't need the tape measure, but I have it here anyway. Cause what I'm going to do with the tape measure, when I'm all done with one, I'm going to show you the length of my chain, because a lot of guys have questions on how long a chains they should be running. I'm going to show you exactly how long my chain is when I'm done with the trap. That's why I got a tape measure here. And then we got this guy. This is a bench swager for swaging aluminum ferrules, making cable stakes and snares and whatever you want to use. I found out quite a few years ago that it works very nice for crimping these J-hooks. Like I said, I'm not going to show you right now. When I have something ready to crimp with that guy, I'll show you how I do it. I use the 3/32 spot, and you just kind of set it in there like that, and boy, it crimps it. It doesn't mar this up as bad as like this tool does. The reason why I have this tool is if I happen to make a mistake and I have to open one back up. Alright, so the things I'm going to be using, I got traps, MB-550s, closed jaws. You guys can have the argument all you want. Boy, you know, I've caught a few coyotes over the years, probably one every year and probably several some years, by the toe. A single toe or maybe 2 toes. Closed jaws. I want that toe caught coyote still waiting for me when I get there. I also think it helps for like making sure if like a raccoon is caught in your trap. Raccoons like to chew, and if they happen to chew, they can pull out. Closed jaw, MB-550s. MB-550s too. I want to make a point of that. These are not Duke 550s. These are the real thing, MB-550s. If you're a Duke 550 guy, please don't even watch my video. I don't even want you watching my video. Alright, we got MB crunch-proof swivels and the J-hooks for them. This is my trap attachment. So on the end of my trap chain, I use the heavy-duty split rings. And I have, like I said, I have a dozen of everything. I actually got 2 dozen J-hooks set in here because you need one for each end of your swivel. I got a dozen name tags set in here. On this side, I have JC Connor shock springs. The springs, and in here are the actual bars. I actually took all this stuff out and I wiped it off, and I kept the rag just so you could see. See how greasy those parts are? So I always wipe them all down first before I ever start, because I'm going to degrease these guys with like oven degreaser and stuff, you know, once I get them all built, and then I'll dip them. I'll let them hang for a couple days after I you know, degrease them, let them get a little bit of surface rust. I'm not talking like full rusty, like this is way too rusty. Just happens to be, these were in my shed and they got rained on. The rain rained in the doorway or whatever and got them all wet, so they rusted in the package. But I degrease these because the 2 plates set flat together in there when you're you know, through the spring, you can't really degrease that very good at all. And I want to make sure I get all that grease out of there because I don't want the coyotes smelling the grease. So yeah, like I said, I wiped them down. You know, it took me 5 minutes maybe to do the dozen of them, but there's that much less grease I got to get out of my trap. Last thing, and I only have one here because I don't put these on typically till after I degrease them, but I use a heavy duty Berkshire cable stake, 26 inches long cable, or actually it's 21 built, you know, with a loop on that end that will go onto one of my split rings. So that's how I stake all my coyote sets down, with a heavy duty Berkshire stake. Oh, I don't think I mentioned this guy. This and this block here. Let's see if I can move this for you. So this block I specially made, so I basically just cut a notch. It's about 1 inch deep and probably 1.5 inches wide. And then I drilled 2 holes in here, and they've kind of wallowed out over the years. Sullivan strap pan tester. When I get my MB-550s ready to go, you guys see where the nuts are on the bottom of that trap, set right down in those holes, and then like the D-ring and everything sets down in the middle of that guy. So that trap is rock solid. So when I'm pushing on my pan with that trap tester, my trap ain't trying to rock all over the place. And like I said, the notch kind of gives the room for the chain to get out of your way, so the chain ain't flopping back in your face. So it's a custom made block. Just happened to be, it's a 4x6, and it happened to have a 45 cut on the end for some reason, and I just never have trimmed it off. So I use this for testing every trap every season. So I'll go through all the ones from last season that were set, and I will retest every one of them. If they're not set right, I will adjust that. I will adjust them before the season starts here. All right. So I think that's everything to kind of get you an idea of what I'm going to be using here. I think I hit on everything here. Like I said, I'm going to go through and kind of get all dozen of these probably in roughly 12 different stages from, very beginning to the very end. I don't know if I'll finish one completely. I'll probably finish it on camera for you guys. But otherwise, like I said, we're going to get them kind of in stages, and I'll show you kind of each stage what I did. A few of the stages I may actually show you what I'm doing here, but I don't want to make this video too super long either, so. All right, guys. So the first step I'm doing on all my traps, I take my JC counter shock spring and I get the 2 plates slid in there, and I'm going to show you I put them in a particular direction all the time. The way they're sheared off, they kind of leave a rounded edge on one side and a more, kind of a flat square edge on the other. And then you can see I've crimped my heavy duty MB crunch proof swivel on there. So I have all of them done except for one here, and I'm gonna quick show you going through this one. So I'm gonna try and show you. You see how there's like that little surface right, let's see, right here. See how there's that little face? And then like on this edge, that face really isn't there. So this edge is like sharp because they sheared it from that side going this way. So this edge is square, and so is that one. And then like I said, on this side, I hope you guys can maybe see that. See how it's kind of rounded off just a little bit? So what I like to make sure that I'm doing, I want the rounded part of that towards my spring. I don't want the sharp side because I feel like it's going to drag on the spring. I want the rounded side. You can kind of see that extra little edge there or whatever. I want that towards my spring. Okay, so then on this one here, you can see that side looks like it's a little bit rounded. For this side here, you can see that it looks like it's like square corners. So I want the 2 square sides next to each other. So square side, rounded side. So the 2 square sides next to each other. So it should be rounded on this edge, which you can hopefully see that kind of edge is there. And if I flip it over, kind of rounded on this edge. And like I said, I feel like in the case if it does have to, by not having the sharp edges up there, lets my spring slide a little easier, and it's less likely to dig into my spring. Where the 2 plates line up with each other in there, I don't really care. The flat, sharp corners, if anything, keep dirt and stuff from getting inside of there. Okay, so shock spring's ready to go. So we got an MB crunch proof swivel and the J-hook for it. We slide that J-hook in there and pull it in. All right, so that's ready to go. All right, the next thing I make sure I do is I always hook up from the bottom. If I hook it the opposite way, if I hook it this way, I'm trying to do this while I'm watching my camera here. If I hook it that way, see how it almost like this is off center from this, like shifted up when I do that. Like the center of my swivel, you know, the center of the J hook here is kind of in line with this top plate, if not a touch higher. See what I'm saying there? So if I hook it the other way, from the bottom going up, now when you're looking at that, the center of this is below this plate. So I feel like that kind of keeps everything in line a little bit easier, a little bit better. So I always put my J hooks going up. All right, now to this guy. So I'm going to show you the trick here, and I'm hoping I can get this on camera. So I use the 3/32 spot in there, and I just set my J hook in there. I'm going to try and get you guys as close as I can so you can see. All right. And then I basically get, I'm hoping you guys can see that. Yeah, so I'm basically, this is setting about where the curved part turns to go straight into my, so it's, oops, sorry. So it's setting about right there, right where the end of my finger is. That's what's setting on the bottom jaw. On the top jaw, I have it setting about a 1/16 of an inch from the end. So it's about there, the edge of my jaw. And like I said, watch how easy this thing squishes. So I just give this guy a little pull. It crimped it nice and tight, and I kind of give it a little extra like, And you can see that thing is perfectly crimped. And I don't weld my J hooks on any of my traps. I've never had an issue with one even thinking about opening up, especially when you use MB Crunch Boost swivels. I've never had a J hook even slightly opened up on me. So I don't weld any of them when I'm done. So there you go. I have all my JC counter shock springs all ready to go. The rest are here. So that's it with those guys. The next thing here, I'm going to move some of my stuff. So this is the stock MB-550. This is one I've modified. You can see what I've done here is I actually bend my spring arm, it's in, so they kind of tuck underneath the base plate there. I had, when I first started trapping using MB traps, and I had one happen with a Bridger Douglas, the springs lever stick out so far, you can either cut them off. I know some guys will do that. They'll cut them off, you know, like leave a 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 inch there, which would be an okay solution as well. But then you can't 4-coil them unless you buy new spring pins. And I don't want to be buying any more new parts than I have to down the road. So what I do is I bend these guys in. Oh, so what I had on a couple of these straps, I had one of these, or 2 times, on one on a 550 and one on that Bridger, it actually folded my spring pin all the way flat to my trap way over here, and it actually bound up my lever on my trap. So the I couldn't move the lever because it kind of pinched it in here when it bent that spring pin. So what I do is I actually bend them in. And basically what I think happened, here's my theory. We'll go back to this one. Here's my theory on how that happens. These spring pins, the chain will go right over the spring pin. And I actually think what happens is your chain, if an animal's flopping around and then they pull on it, all of a sudden all the torque is pulling on that spring pin. So by bending them in like that, and I'll show you, I'm going to show you how I do it. I'm not going to actually do one on camera because it takes quite a bit of mechanical advantage to get it done. But basically now, no matter how this thing runs, it always is going to slide off the edge. There's no way that my chain or anything can't get caught hooked over that chain. It's always going to slide off of it. Like I said, so I try to at least get them at least that far, if not just a little bit farther tipped in. I may actually bend these just a little bit more. So how I do that, I use my heavier lineman pliers and I grab, I'm trying to do this so you can see, so I'm going to grab it from the opposite side, but I would grab it from the bottom of the trap. So I grab it like that, So now when I go to try and bend that, it's gonna bend it at the thickness of my pliers. If I just grab onto it and bend it, like I said, it's gonna pinch where the lever is on there. So here's your lever on the side of that. I don't want it pinching right on the lever, so I grab this with my pliers like that. I'm trying to get so you guys can see that. There you go. You can see that pretty good there. So I grab it like that, and then I take well, we call it a water pump pliers. You get, all right. So I just grab that on. I'm hold that nice and tight. I take what I call a water pump pliers, a channel lock, some guys call them, and you basically just grab the end of that spring pin and just grab it, squeeze as hard as you can, and then I'm holding this hand here and almost twisting this way with it, because as I push down, I'm kind of going opposite directions. And basically I just get it bent over as far as I can that way to get it tucked underneath there. And then once I get it tucked under, sometimes it actually tips it down a little. Then you can just grab onto it, you know, like this, grab onto it and pull back towards, and pull it so it hits up here. You'll bend it back up. So I said, they're just so they're underneath that guy, so they don't, the chain can't catch on. Like I said, I may bend these in just a skosh more, but generally that's all I do to that is just bend them in. Again, if I would ever want to 4-coil them, I'll just grab that, bend it back straight, and I can put my 4-coils on there. I don't have any 4-coiled MB-550s. I have some that are close. Well, basically, I think as soon as they come out, I think they're close to 10 years old. I don't know for sure. They're still plenty strong. I have a hard time setting them all the time. So if I can't set them, they're going to hold a coyote. That's my opinion. All right. The next adjustment I made to that trap, and this is going to be kind of tough to see. All right. So I'm looking at the end of the dog here. There is probably about 50 thousandths, 0.50 from the night latch. So from that little lip to the end of the dog. One tool I forgot to show you earlier, a flat file. So what I do is I take my file and I will file the end of that dog down until I'm closer to about 30 thousandths. Just trying to get so you guys can kind of see. So I got it filed down so it's like 30 thousandths compared to close to 50 thousandths. I'm doing the best I can here. I may try to take some pictures of this and I'll put them in here. But you can see how much more is on this side. This side is quite a bit longer than that side. So you can see I filed roughly half of that dog off, the end of the dog, between the end and where the night latch is. What that's going to do is just shorten up the stroke on your pan. So when this thing is set, you know, like that, it's hard to do without the spring tension. This only has to move, you know, like that far and the thing sets off. So the longer you leave that, the more stroke it takes on your pan to set it off. So I'm not hair triggering my trap necessarily because it's still, I run around 3.5 pounds of pan tension on there. So this still takes a fair amount to move, but once it moves, I want that thing to move as short as I can and then go off. I don't want that thing, you know, having to fall from here all the way down to here before the trap goes off. That's just, to me, alerting the coyote that something's going on. I want basically, as soon as that pan moves, I want that trap going off. All right, so one more thing that I did with this trap that I'm probably not going to be able to show you. So to set the pan tension, I like about 3.5. This trap was stock about 4.5. So I actually run my my solvent trap tester on there, use my big block, and I set it off twice. It registered about 4.5. So each line on these things is about a pound. So that should be 1 pound, 2 pounds, 3 pounds, and 4, and it was like that much more. You know, and that should be 5 roughly at the very end. So 1, 2, 3, and I want it setting off about in here. So what I did, you can do two things. Some guys will grab this in the vise and bend your dog down just a little bit. I do not like that solution. The trouble is with bending it down, if you have to make a modification that in the field, so say a coyote, you catch a coyote and he tweaks your dog or tweaks something on your trap and it doesn't want to stay set because you got too light a pan tension. I can't bend that back out in the field because it's a stainless dog. You have to like pound on it with a hammer to bend it. You got to clamp, basically you would clamp like here in the vise and then hit on here to bend it like this essentially is what you're trying to do. But all that essentially is doing is taking the flat that the pan sits on there and turning it down. So you're leaning that edge down, and the farther you lean that edge down, the easier it is for your trap to fall off of it. So what I do is I actually take my file on the end of that thing and I tip my file a little bit like this, and I'll stick it right up to the night latch. So I'm only filing this little face on the end. I know it's tough to see that, but this little face on the end, I take my file on there and I tip my file like this, and I'll file, and it does not take a lot. If you're over like 5 pounds, you got to have a pretty good slope on there. This one was at like 4.5, so that would be flat. I tip it, oops, I'm trying to do it so you guys can see. I tip it about at that angle, and I give it about 3 or 4 good strokes on there, and that's all it took, and this trap is now at 3.5. All right, I was gonna build a series of these traps and then kind of go through step by step, but I think I'm pretty well explained those things now. So what I'd have, so this trap, I set it off twice using my block in my pan tester. It sets off between 3 and 3.5. That's where I like mine. I have fox in my area. I don't mind catching raccoons. I kind of hate catching skunks in my coyote sets, but it does happen. So what I do before I add anything onto my trap, I do all this adjusting to the trap itself beforehand. So basically all I did is I bent my pin lever in, or the spring pin in, I guess that's probably called, and I filed the end of my dog down, and I filed it just at a little bit of slope. So I filed it flat first, shortened it, then I pan tested it twice. I pushed right on the 550 on my trap too. So that's something I want to go over here too. So I push, you can see where that little mark is. So I start with my pan tester about right here. And then when it goes off, it kind of jumps and it leaves these little marks. Really, to me, anywhere, even where that mark is at, anywhere on that 550 or where that mark is at, center your pans where you want. That's where I set my pan tension. I want that at 3.5. It's going to be less the farther out you get towards the end. I don't even test it. If I may test it and I'll let you guys know. The closer you get up to the swivel point up here, the higher the pan tension is going to be, because you got a lever. So I could push here and I can't push, but I could push out here, and it's going to push a lot easier. So the bigger arm you have, the easier it's going to push. I want the coyote trying to step on the middle of my trap. I'm not planning on him stepping on the edge. I'm planning on him stepping on the middle. I don't want to have out here at like 4.5 pounds of tension. It's going to take, probably 6, 7, 8 pounds of tension in the middle of that pan to set the strap off. And I don't want that. So I tested it twice. It was high. I adjusted it. I actually set it off. It was still a little high, and I adjusted it again. Again, just by filing, the dog at that little bit of an angle. The nice thing about that is I keep a file like this in my truck. If I have one that's misbehaving, I can always either say it goes off too early or too low a pan tension. Basically, all you need to do, so instead of filing like this to lower your pan tension, straighten it back out and file it back so you get more of a square notch in there, and that will increase your pan tension back up again. So the more you go like this, the higher your pan tension is going to be. The more you go like this, the lower your pan tension is going to be. So if I get this way down, you know, get it filed the end like that, it's not going to take no pressure at all to set that trap off. So again, I don't know, it's probably about, say, 20 degrees or something. I have it filed at about that slope. And that's what it took to get it to go from 4.5 to 3.5. If it was still a little high, I'd actually just tip this a little bit more. And again, it's about, you know, 3 good strokes, and that's all it takes to adjust it. All right. So the next step I do with this guy, so the trap is adjusted the way I want it. Next thing I do, we're going to put my shock spring on there. So we got a J hook. We're going to run that in the stock spring or stock chain here. And again, we're going to hook from the bottom up. So again, I feel like that kind of keeps me more in line. We're going to slide this over here. Again, I was kind of hoping I could get you so you could see that better, but so you can kind of see what I got going on there. So I got like a 16 sticking out on the top, and I'm about right in the corner on the bottom. And then all I have to do is just pull down on this thing, and there it hits, and I just give it like a more. And that, you can see that that thing is perfectly tight. There's no gap in the bottom of that thing at all. All right. So we're just about done. Next thing, split ring. That's what I got my flat screwdriver for. You know, guys use different things. I just turn my screwdriver sideways, holds it nice and open. Slide your swivel on there, the end of your chain swivel on there. Spin it around. Okay. That part of it's done. Last thing here, name tag. I'm going to do this out because I don't want you guys reading my name tag on there, but so I put my name tag on the center swivel on all my traps. I do it on, if I'm don't have a shock spring on there, so if like my raccoon traps and that type of stuff, I'll put it on the end one by my stake. Otherwise, like on any of my coyote sets, it's in the middle. I feel like when a coyote's fighting your trap, a lot of times this part of it is rubbing on the ground, you know, and the end swivel, you know, they're going round and around, and because this is all buried under my trap, so you're kind of going out of your trap bed and then hitting the ground. Typically this one should be above the ground, and I feel like it takes a little less damage. Also, I feel like if a coyote's going to chew, they're going to chew down towards the bottom where it's attached to the ground. They chew up my name tags once in a while, but not usually too much. All right, name tag here. So what I do is I stick it through the inside, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to run it past probably a good maybe 5/8 of an inch, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it at me and then flush along the outside of my swivel here. So all I'm going to do is just bend it with my finger. So I just bent it at 90 and bent it again. So what that actually did here, I'll take it out, it actually makes a little J out of my name tag. So all I do is just slide it back in between there, and I hook it on the outside of my swivel. So now it's basically folded nice and tight over my swivel. So what I'm doing is I'm going to pinch this way to keep it as tight as I can, and I'm going to pull this way to keep it tight on this end. So all this is just to keep your name tag nice and tight. So I'm pinching with this hand and I'm pushing with this hand to keep it tight, and then I'm going to fold it over. All right, you see how that folded that right nice and tight? And then on this end, I'm going to just keep folding it over and get it folded into the inside. Now I take my pliers. Because you can kind of see it's not really folded completely tight. I'm going to take my pliers in there, and I'm going to I want it about halfway in between my two, you know, on the side of this thing. I don't want it all the way like to one end like that, because then like this J hook might rub on it, and I don't want it all the way to the bottom. So I want it about right in the middle, so neither one of the J hooks will rub on it. And then I'm going to grab it, and I'm going to squeeze as hard as I can. And then I actually go on the opposite side, even though there's nothing here, I squeeze that. Now you can see it folded that thing over nice and tight on there, and it doesn't want to move. It's pinched down on the side of that thing. So all my traps are like that, and I do all this before I dye my traps, so that will get dye over the top of it, you know, and cover it right up. All right. So I told you I was going to show you how long of chain I end up with. So I use, no matter what trap I'm using, so like the Bridgers typically have like a 2-inch longer chain than the MBs come with. I leave the stock chain exactly how it is, the stock swivel at the top, all that stuff. One thing I will look at is the stock J hooks on here. I make sure that they're crimped all the way tight. Those look good, and the stock one at the end looks good. So depending on which trap, again, I use the stock chain, add a J hook, shock spring, and another crunch proof sole at the end, and then I got my split ring. So from the base of my trap, you can see I'm at just under 17 inches to my swivel here, to the back of my swivel. And that's with that stretched out. Try and measure it one more time. Yeah, so you can see I'm about right on 17 inches. So 17 inches total length from trap base to the end of my swivel on this. You know, that's not a lot of room, but I feel like that gives me plenty of room so I don't have trouble with the coyotes trying to pump my stake out. I don't want a 3-foot chain. I'm a short chain guy. I don't want a 3-foot chain because that means a coyote can run from, with my trap over here, 3 feet from the center, plus the coyote is bigger and he's going to be farther out. When he runs, he's probably starting, say, a foot or more beyond that. So he's 4 foot over here. If a coyote gets 8 feet of run before he hits the end, what do you think that's going to do to all your J hooks and everything else on here? I think that's why some people have trouble with them opening them up. When you give them that much room to run and jerk on that thing, that's when things are going to start breaking. You're going to have failures in your swivel points, your shock spring. You know, that's when you're going to get bent or popped out jaws. Not on 550s because the way they're hooked on there, you're never going to get the jaws popped out of there. But again, and I feel like you're going to have a chance for more pullouts because again, if you have like a toe caught one and he gets a good run at that thing, he can just yank his toes right out of there. He may even rip his tips of his toes off, but he's going to jerk himself out of there. By this, they're really only getting 18 inches over here to 18 inches over here. They really don't get all that much run. A back leg caught one will give you a little bit more run, and no matter what you do, you can't always guarantee a front foot catch. I try for front feet. I still catch a couple every year by the back foot, and I will catch fox by the back feet as well, it seems like. All right. The only other thing that I do to these traps, and I'm not going to make you sit through and watch this, is I will take, once I spray my trap, degrease my trap, so I use oven degreaser, and I'll literally spray this entire setup exactly how it is. I will degrease this. I use a plastic garbage bag. I turn it inside out because a lot of garbage bags are scented. So by turning it inside out, now the outside of the bag is the inside. I will stick this in there, basically hold it and spray it with oven degreaser. Stick it in the bag. I will probably do a half a dozen in one bag. I will give them all a good spray, tie the bag shut, and I will leave it maybe 20 minutes like that. So basically like the fumes of the oven degreaser and everything are around your trap. After 20 minutes, I'll open my bag back up, just take a garden hose and spray them off, and then I hang them up. Just like that, they'll be hanging there. I hang them up, and like I said, I'll leave them like probably a good week, You know, it just kind of depends on when I have time, and then I will speed dip. I use speed dip for all my traps. So that's why I want a little bit of rust. But once they're sprayed, then I will put my cable stake on. So my cable stake will just go on here just like your, you know what, it's only gonna take a second here. So you just slip that on there, spin it around. Voila. Cable stake is attached. So this trap actually, if I didn't want to degrease or anything, it's ready to set in the ground just exactly like it is. So again, that's how I set up my coyote traps. Again, I bend the end, file the dog down to shorten it and to set my pan tension. I will test the pan tension, make sure it works. Oh, after I speed dip these guys, I take my file and I will file off my night latch and the face of my dog, and I will clean out underneath the pan where your dog catches. Because the speed dip will actually lighten up your pan tension just a little bit, or actually sometimes quite a bit, because it's kind of slippery. So I'll make sure I clean that off before I go to set my trap on the ground. Alright guys, so that should have been a pretty thorough step-by-step on how I modify my traps. Like I said, bending the spring pins, it doesn't take all that long, maybe 2 minutes a trap, a minute on each side. It's just trying to film it. I tried to film it once and I keep knocking my camera over because you got to kind of get, you know, angled leverage on it, whatever, and I couldn't seem to get it filmed for you guys. But again, all I do is I grab the base of that spring pin right by the lever with my lineman pliers, or any pliers will work, and then I use the channel lock pliers to just kind of grab it and bend it down underneath the base plate. And again, that just keeps the chain from catching on there. Since I've done that, I haven't had any issues with my chain catching up or being tangled up around the trap or anything like that. It always seems to stay free. The one I showed you, I bent them in probably another 1/8 of an inch on each side, so they're folded all the way, so the ends are all the way underneath that base plate. So I had to bend them, you know, just a little bit farther in. That way, like I said, there is no chance of it actually getting caught on there. And again, you could cut them off. I know some guys like that. I don't have a bolt cutter here. I could use like a hacksaw or something and cut them off. But again, that kind of limits me if I'd ever want to 4-coil these. I can't, I'd have to buy the spring pins, the 4-coil. This way I wouldn't have to do that. Yeah, like I said, just file the dog down is a lot easier than trying to bend it. It's a little bit easier to kind of control, because like I said, take like 2 strokes with your file, test it again. Take 2 strokes with your file, test it. If you bend them, I have a few that are actually bent. Some of the first ones I bought are bent. And the issue I had with that is when I bent them, I had to, some of them, you're just hitting it with a hammer trying to bend them, because those dogs are very tough to bend. And then I ended up having to try and straighten them back out because I actually bent them too far. I wish I'd have known this filing trick years ago, because that sure saves a lot of headache on these traps. And like I said, I can modify them in the field if I need to. You know, once in a while a dog will get bent, even on these 550s, a coyote or something will bend them. You know, if the chain happens to wrap up around your dog or something like that, they do get bent. But like I said, I usually kind of straighten them a little bit with the pliers. If they bend, they usually bend right in here, just past the round part. They usually bend there. You know, so usually I can bend them back up a little bit. And then, like I said, then start playing with my file to get the pan tension. I typically don't take the Sullivan's pan tester with me out on the line. Once you set enough of these traps, you kind of get a pretty good idea. You know, like I said, like this trap here is set now at 3.5. Set it a few times and just use your thumb and just squeeze how much pressure it takes to set that trap off. You kind of get a pretty good idea about where you want it. Am I getting them 100% perfect on the line? Are they exactly 3.5 pounds? I don't know. I get them, you know, below 5 and above 1. Let's put it that way. Just by, like I said, in the field, you know, I'm not spending an hour. I'm spending 2-3 minutes with the file, setting them a couple times, just making sure that, you know, they ain't just free falling and that they ain't, you know, locked up and you can't set the thing off. All right, I think I'm done babbling on for you guys. I went through that, I feel like, pretty quickly. I don't know, maybe not, the video is plenty long here, but if you guys got questions, please leave them in the comments below like always. I try to respond to every comment as they come in. Hopefully I showed everything good enough for you guys. If I didn't show something good enough and you want to see something a little bit better, like I said, leave a comment down below and I'll try and see what I can do. If I have to put up a second little video, trying to show some of this a little bit clearer, I will. Otherwise, I appreciate you guys watching. Hopefully this will help you guys. Again, I'm a short chain guy and I'm a closed jaw guy. If you don't like that, get over it. If you're a Duke 550 guy, please don't even like my video. Unsubscribe from my channel. I don't really care. Duke ripped off MB's design. I don't care what anybody says. And now if you read any of the forums or anything else, the guys are having trouble with the spring levers, the actual levers, this part of it bending. They're looking at how do they four coil them right away because the coil springs on the Dukes aren't as strong. Yeah, you cheaped out and bought Duke traps. You got what you pay for. I buy the real things. Luckily, I bought these last spring and I'm finally getting around to getting them set up. So the prices have went up a little bit on the 550s. But again, you get what you pay for. I have very little tuning. Most of my traps, I probably have to adjust the pan tension on maybe 5% of my traps after the season. That's after all the catches and everything like that. I maybe adjust 5% of them to just get them back where I want them. And most of the time, they usually get a little bit heavier in my opinion. After I make catches, it seems like they're a little bit stiffer than I want them. And I have to adjust the pan tension back down, in the off season here. So I will go through, like I said, and actually I'm going to do it in the next week here. I'm going to go through all my 550s that I previously had, and I will test all the pan tension. I will go through every J hook, make sure they all have a name tag on them. So basically everything I did to build this thing, I will inspect the whole works. Trap, J hook, springs, chain, the whole works. Make sure they're working in perfect shape. And I will do that to every one of my coyote traps before the season begins here. Alright guys, thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.